What up, fam? Agent O here, and I've got another action figure review. And today I'm going to be reviewing the Berserk figure from the Maxfactory Figma line. This is Berserker Gutts. He's rocking the Berserker armor that he got from the Sword of the Millenium Falcon arc, I think it's called, or Hawk of the Millennium Empire arc. I've been a fan of Berserk for some years now, since I don't know, like the 90s or something like that. Ever since I caught wind of the anime, and I've got another Berserk figure, and it's just the Black Swordsman Gutts. I think it was from the Kyoto line a real long time ago. But I always wanted to get a figure of him in the Berserker armor, and when Figma did this figure, I was like, yo, I can't pass this up. So I got it, and here I am today reviewing it. So just to start off, once I opened up the box, I was actually really surprised to see a Berserk manga book in the box that came with the figure. I didn't know this was going to be included. Since I bought this obviously off HobbyLink Japan website, and yeah, they didn't, as far as I could tell, they didn't mention this figure at all, or the book coming with this figure, or these two collectible postcards, which I thought was really cool. The manga is in Japanese, so unfortunately I can't read it, but it's great to actually have a physical copy of it. I've been reading the fans translated versions off the internet, but anyway, I thought this was really cool that they threw this in here, and that's a welcome. I think it actually, I feel like it adds a bit more to making it feel like this was worth the cost to buy this figure. Anyway, enough about that stuff. I'm going to talk about the figure now. So far, I mean, the sculpt looks pretty, comic book accurate. I would say show accurate, but we haven't seen that yet. Hopefully possibly by the fourth Berserk movie that they've been doing, which is like summarizing up the series. Maybe we'll see a glimpse of it, maybe not. That'd be cool if we did. But anyway, the sculpt of this figure is really good. There's not a whole lot of paint apps other than at the eyes and Guts' face for the alternate head, and on the forearms there's a bit of there's some paint application there, but this really doesn't need it because it's mostly, the majority of it is armor and cape, so you only really need one color scheme, and the plastic that they use works really well in giving off that medieval metallic look, and it, light bounces off of it pretty well, and you can see all the shaping and the metal plating that they sculpted onto the figure, which was really nice. As far as articulation, it's got, both heads are on a neck joint, and then the head itself sits on a rotating ball joint, and then the neck itself, the base of the neck, has a peg that fits into the chest, and that gives it added articulation also. Unfortunately, with the Berserker head, you don't get a whole lot of articulation. I found that the sculpt of it itself is kind of what hinders the articulation, which is unfortunate, but it's, if you're going to get so accurate, then that's kind of one of the things you run into with these action figures, and that is kind of unfortunate. But you still do get a pretty good range of motion from side to side, and you do get some up and down motion with the head. The mouth is articulated on the Berserker head. The shoulders have pretty good range of motion. It's cool how they fitted in those inner plates that are closer to the center of the chest, and how they move along with the shoulder rotation. He's got elbow joints. They're not completely double jointed, but they do get pretty good range of motion. His hands are on a swivel peg actually, that fits into the forearm, and that's going to be a little bit of a gripe. I'm going to get to that in a little bit. But as far, he's got chest, and he's got a hip swivel, so there's added articulation there. He's got ball joints in his hips, which I'm going to get to that in a sec too, because I have a bit of a problem with that. And he's got double jointed knees. He's got ankle swivel. He's got toe swivel, pointer, whatever you want to call it. He's got all that stuff. Now, those are all the good things with this figure. Now, I'm gonna jump really quick to all the stuff I didn't like about this figure. First of all is the cape. Now, the look of this cape is actually really cool. It looks just like Miura's artwork that he draws in the comics. It has this kinetic energy that I don't know how he does it with his inks, but you know, he does a really good job of making that thing look really flowy and almost like it's got a life of its own in the comic. And I think they really mimicked that very well with this sculpt of the cape. But that's like where it ends, because the cape itself is molded out of a really hard plastic and there's absolutely no flexibility whatsoever. It's actually kind of heavy. That actually kind of works to its advantage, because once you've got it attached to Gutts' back, you can kind of use it in place of the stand for some poses. But that's about it, because since it lacks any kind of flexibility, it actually hinders some of the posing you can do, and you have to rely a bit more with the base that it comes with. And that is another problem, because the peg hole for the base actually fits into his lower back, and in order to get it to fit there and have the cape, you have to bend him, you have to have him looking hunched forward, and that doesn't work for every single pose you want to do. Now, there are some poses that you want to do with him hunched over, because it kind of gives him that bestial, you know, animalistic, primal look, and I do want it, and I do like that, and I do that with some of the poses that I took when I was taking pictures for this figure. But if you want to do stand-up poses with him holding, you know, with him standing straight up, it's going to be a bit more difficult. That, and also the way that the cape pegs into the back, there's only one peg hole, which is kind of unfortunate, because I think with a figure like this, it needed 2 peg holes. And since you don't get that, it's kind of you kind of have to really kind of work to fit that cape in the back, into his back, into the peg hole in his back, which is unfortunate, but it's not too big of a deal. You just gotta be careful when you're posing it, so that you don't mess up the rest of your pose trying to get the cape in there. So I would put the cape in beforehand and then start posing the figure. Now, the way you switch the heads on these figures is actually kind of cool, because you almost can't tell that the top of that middle chest piece, the whole top of it comes off when you want to replace it with the open helmet head version of Gutts, where you can see his face through the Berserk helmet, through the armor helmet. And you know, it's got 2 square peg holes that pop out, and that the front chest piece fits into, and then you put the cowl kind of cape piece on top, and then you put the head on, and it's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. I didn't even read the instructions on how to do it. I just kind of figured it out on my own. I have a complaint with the hands. Now, he comes with a bunch of hands, and I really dig the fact that the hands come with the storage tree that most Figma figures come with. I've only bought the 2 Tekkaman Blade figures, and they both came with those hand trees. I think that's really cool that they do that, along with the poly bags for storage, so you don't lose any of those pieces. I wish more companies would actually do that, because that's really a slick, convenient idea. It saves me from having to go out and buy little poly bags, little Ziploc bags to store the pieces and stuff myself. So kudos to them for thinking that through. Now, back to the hands. The hands, you get several different hands. You get holding hands. You get like 2 sets of holding hands. One that holds the sword at an angle, and one that holds the sword straight up and down. These are great. They do hold the sword rather decently. They do kind of tend to fall off if the sword does kind of fall out of the hands if you mess with it a bit too much, but it's not that big of a deal. Now, my gripe is the fact that these hands are on a peg swivel. Now, even though you have angled sword holding hands, it still would have benefited greatly from having those hands be set in a ball socket swivel. I mean a ball socket peg, or even just have the forearms have a ball socket that the hands just fit on, because you still can't get, it gives you, like, having it on a ball socket gives you just the right amount of extra range of motion for, for certain, like, double sword holding poses and whatnot. Now, I wish they did this instead of the peg swivel. Really feels like a misstep on their part. But now my other gripe is with the ball socket joints in the hips. You get a decent range of motion, but not as much as I would like, and I think this figure suffers in posability because of that. I feel like I'm really spoiled with the way SH Figure Arts has been doing their Kamen Rider Ryuki line, with the way they've been doing the joints for that line, because I feel like I can get so many cool poses and extreme to subtle poses with those figures, just because of the way though they've done their hip joints. I wish Figma would, or Maxfactory, whatever you want to call them, I wish they would kind of adopt something similar to how they do it, because even though you get decent, like, spread leg action poses, you still are hindered, and it's not even hindered because of the sculpt. The sculpt actually is a little like at the top where the armor part of the thigh meets the hip. It's actually flexible plastic, so there's a lot of give, and so it doesn't hinder the posability. The lack of posability actually comes from the joints themselves, which is a downer. It's not a deal breaker per se, but it does hurt the overall, I guess, variety of poses that I feel you could really get out of this figure. You can't go too extreme without accidentally popping one of the legs out of the socket, which is what I did do while I was posing this figure. I was trying to get a pose of him, crouching with one hand on the ground, the other hand holding the sword, and it just couldn't be done because of the lack of range of motion in his hip joints. So, that's my biggest gripe. But on the bright side, the figure does come with the character Schierke. She is, for those of you that don't know, she's a sorceress. She's kind of an amateur. She's kind of an amateur. She's still got a lot to learn. I guess the little figurette that you get of her, the figurette of her is basically fits on his back through a peg hole on the cape, and even though it's a cool little accessory, I actually kind of dig it, because she's made out of a translucent plastic with a little bit of, like, this light frosted white paint that they sprayed on her, and then they did a little bit of paint apps for her face. Other than that, there really isn't any other articulation on her aside from her head, which is just on a peg that fits into the rest of the body. You can, turn her head for certain poses and whatnot. But I think it works really good for setting up poses with, dramatic lighting, because, since she's translucent, it really makes her pop and really makes her look like, really gives off the effect of her spirit form when she's, trying to reel Guts back from, completely teetering over the edge into complete berserk insanity, and, letting the armor completely consume him both mentally and physically. So, that was a cool little addition, and I didn't see that in any of the advertisement pictures for this figure, so that was felt like a little bonus to me anyway, because I wasn't expecting that. I was just really expecting the figure with his sword, the stand, a bunch of interchangeable hands, and the extra head. So all this other little extra stuff was cool. Now, for me, the question comes up as to whether or not I can say that I would recommend this figure to just, for you to just run out and buy willy-nilly. Now, I guess that all depends on how big of a Berserk fan you are, or I guess how picky you are about, having optimum posability in your figures. This isn't a bad figure. I really want to like this figure. I just think that there's some things, those few things that are wrong with the way this figure was put together that kind of make me say that, I don't know if I would really go out of my way to pick this up. I think if I didn't own it already and I saw this review, I'd probably just be like, yeah, I'll go ahead and take my chances, because this is a pretty nice looking figure. I mean, Figma, Maxfactory always does a good job with their sculpts. Not to say if Maxfactory does a horrible job, because they do good work too. I'm still kicking myself to this day for not getting that Karas figure that they did, because that was hands down one of the best figures I've ever seen come out of that company, and just one of the best figures, I think, hands down. And despite the problems, the posability issues, and the issue with the cape, you can still work around a lot of those issues to get some cool action poses out of it. I would say if you have the money and you want the figure, go ahead and get it. But if you're feeling pretty picky and and you got really high standards as to how you want your figures to perform, then I would probably say you should pass on this figure. Only because if you're like me, there's certain things that you want to see done well with a figure, and if they're not done that well, then you won't want to. You'll be disappointed in the fact that you paid good money for this figure. So I guess in conclusion, I would say, I guess for me, there is no right or wrong answer as to whether or not you should pick this figure up. In the end, I guess you should just use your own judgment based on the things I've pointed out in my review, and I guess any other reviews that you see out there in YouTube land. You shouldn't only go by what one reviewer says. I think you should take into account what a bunch of people say about the figure, because I mean, you are going to get a lot of people who are just going to say yes to everything despite whatever problems there are with the figure, and they'll just kind of either gloss over them or not even point them out at all. But then you'll run across reviews that are a bit more critical about the figure, and they can show a lot of love for the figure too, which are reviews I tend to listen to a lot more myself. So, use your judgment. If you got the money for it, go for it. If you don't, and you're a bit more picky about what you choose to buy, then maybe you should pass on it. But like I said, it's not a bad figure. It's got its little hang-ups, but you know what? No action figure is perfect. So, I guess that's going to be pretty much it for me. I've got some other stuff coming down the pipeline, some Transformers and whatnot that I've finally gotten a hold of, and I guess that'll pretty much do it. I'm Agent O, and I'm out. Peace.